right off the gate, I want to put y'all on the spot, if you will. I want you to define the difference between being rich and being wealthy and what it means to you. And Aaron, I want to start with you.
It's a good question, Mark. I think that the difference between rich and wealthy, rich seems more kind of short-term, immediate. Maybe you feel rich based on your income.
Mm-hmm.
But wealthy to me speaks more of long-term, bases are covered. You're not worried about what may happen in the economy. It's not that you don't think about it, but it's not going to affect your lifestyle too much if the market drops tomorrow a little bit, or if so-and-so gets elected or whatever. If you're wealthy, those certain circumstances maybe don't impact you as much as just simply being rich. I think wealthy to me feels more significant. That's definitely what we are aiming for with our clients is kind of getting above the rat race of trying to get rich.
Yeah.
Wealthy is I've done what I need to do to get outside of the ups and downs and the whims of those kind of things.
Did you guys read Great Gatsby? High school?
Yeah.
I saw the movie.
It
It wasn't very good.
I don't know if that's
I
the
think I
same
read
thing.
the Cliff Notes. That was about it.
It reminds me of Great Gatsby. There's like the old money versus the new money. And I won't ruin the book if you haven't read the book, but it's a good one. But someone shows up, they're new to money, and they kind of enter into this scene of old money. And that very much feels like rich versus wealthy. Rich is kind of like hustling and like very active and trying to keep the train on the tracks and more. And wealthy is more, I'm sitting back,
Yeah.
I'm relaxed, I'm comfortable. I don't have to, like you say, I don't have to worry about my bases. They're covered. And yeah, I make money, but it's more than that. And it's also, it feels like there's a mindset too.
Yeah.
Maybe a mindset difference between rich and wealthy. I'm curious if you would say that same thing.
I would totally agree. I think some might think, well, rich is up to X dollars, but then above that, whatever that threshold is, then you're wealthy. That doesn't really fit with the way I think about it. It's more of a mindset for me. It is more along the lines of like satisfied, content.
Mm-hmm.
That's more wealthy. Rich is like, what's the quote by, I think it was Rockefeller back in the day, he's being interviewed. I think he's the richest man, at least in America, maybe, the world at that point. I don't know. But he's being asked, how much is enough? And he said, just a little bit more.
So really he's broke.
Right. That's it, in a nutshell, the rich mindset versus wealthy is like, I'm content.
But at the Vincent Financial Group, do you run into the problem of people not really understanding what exactly it is that you can do for people, and they bring you their portfolio and they just say, all right, here's my information, go make me rich? It doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. Well, it goes both ways too. So I'll say this. A lot of people come to our office and they don't realize that they have enough to be wealthy right now. They have enough to be wealthy right now, but the mindset isn't there. They don't understand what that level of savings means for their life. And that's a difficult thing to quantify because it's not taught in school. You're not going to learn this at your HR department at work. This is not something that just comes easy in our society to understand I've saved this much money and what does that mean for my life?
Yeah.
So there's that certainly as well. I think a lot of people are wealthier than they think they are or realize that they are, which is fun to discover, in that meeting. But there are some, to your point, Mark, who come in and they're, hey, I've been investing for a while and I'm ready to pour some extra gas on that fire. I've been doing okay, but you guys, the experts, can make me rich. Let's get this thing going. And it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think too, I love the idea of a difference in mindset, wealthy versus rich. And I think that wealthy mindset is actually what's going to allow you to enjoy retirement a little bit more, because if you're rich, it's kind of like Rockefeller. It's like, I want more. I want more.
Yeah.
And to me, wealthy is more about, I don't necessarily need more. I have what I need. A great example of that is with health. I think it's easy to see with health too. Like there's people, if you don't have your health, you have nothing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can kind of work the same way with money. Like if all you're doing is chasing money, you might have a lot of money, but you actually don't have anything.
It's never enough.
Yeah, because it's never actually going to be enough. Whereas wealthy, it's more than money. I feel like wealth encompasses sure, how much you've saved and like what your standard of living might look like, but it's more mindset. It's, are you healthy? How are your relationships? Like, do you have a plan for your life? Are you on a trajectory? I mean, man, you can be wealthy without having, millions of dollars in the bank.
Yeah, you said relationships and health, and that makes me think about it. All kind of comes down to a plan and having context. And that's me, beating the dead horse of planning. That's what we do. But without a context of what your money means for you, you can never be wealthy, because there's a definition of contentment and satisfaction that it just will never be real for you without the understanding of kind of how that equates to your life. And it doesn't mean the same thing if you're rich.
770-741-0120. Finding your own definition of wealthy. I heard somebody, and I stole this from somebody, and I kind of live my life by this too. For me, being wealthy doesn't mean a second house, doesn't mean a beach house or an RV. To me, it means I can pay my bills without worry. Like at this point of my life where I know summertime's here, I know the Georgia power bill is going to be a little bit more expensive because we keep it cold in the house. I know when that bill comes in that I'm not stressing out. I'm knowing that we're not going to have to cut back on 10 different things to pay this one bill, just knowing that we are just comfortable. To me, that's a form of wealth that I strive for at this point in my life. 770-741-0120, retireatlradio.com to meet the team and to schedule that consultation. We do invite you to call this weekend. We have a representative standing by right now. Vincent Financial Group, let's talk about you for a second here. Home office in Woodstock. What's going on? What's on the people's mind? What are you working on now that we're getting into summer? Things, do they slow down a little bit, or are you just as busy? People looking to move some money around for vacations? What are you working on, Aaron?
We're definitely just as busy. I think that people with a little bit more downtime, whether it's vacation or kids are off of school, I think everyone gets busier. There are more activities happening, but I also think that seems to kick up some more conversation. You have some more time. Maybe you're at the beach for a week and you think about, what's this all about?
Yeah.
What does the next 10 years look like? And
I could do this more often.
I could do this more often.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So we're having more conversations this time of year than ever. People just finished their taxes. It's a certain time of year that definitely creates more conversations with our clients, more touch points. We love that. We actually reach out to our clients every 90 days. If you're a client of Vincent Financial Group, you will hear from us every single quarter. It's crazy to think we're almost halfway through the year. We're getting to that point where summer's upon us, and that just brings with it a whole new set of conversations. So we're as busy as ever.
Yeah. 770-741-0120. We invite you to call this weekend. Reach out to the team, schedule that no-cost, no-obligation consultation with the team at the Vincent Financial Group. That initial consultation, if you've saved at least $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 or more, it's no cost, it's no obligation. Again, 770-741-0120. But we're never ignoring the headlines, whether you're on vacation, whether you're thinking about that second opinion. The headlines are in our face. We're talking about the tariffs, which seem to change every single week, geopolitical situations. The word recession keeps popping up into all the news headlines now. And I want you to hear this clip from AARP CEO Dr. Maisha Minter-Jordan. Now, AARP has more than 38 million members, but what are they most concerned about right now?
People are living longer, they're staying in the workforce longer, and so the needs are changing, but the needs are still urgent. Our members are most worried about Medicare, Social Security, and family caregiving. We're hearing more and more from people who are in the sandwich generation, taking care of younger children, taking care of their aging parents, and the financial hardships that can bring.
Social Security, Medicare, some of the things that people are always thinking about. It's always evolving and changing. Matt Decker, how do you stay ahead of these changing and help out the families you serve?
Well, it's certainly tough because there are a lot of challenges. I think the biggest one that she mentioned there at the end is probably the sandwich generation. Maybe you've got older kids who are still kind of on the payroll, as they say, and you might also be taking care of your parents. And that's a tough place to be. I mean, we've had several clients in the last probably 2 months that are, coming in saying, I don't know what to do about, taking care of my parents. It's going to cost me $6,000 a month, $7,000 a month. I think we have some paying $10,000 a month for memory care.
And they're still paying for college.
And they're still paying for college, and they got kids on the payroll. And we talk about the difference between being rich and being wealthy earlier. Well, one of the things that can erode your wealth faster than just about anything is going to be in that sandwich generation, taking care of parents, long-term care, memory care type planning. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things to be concerned about. And certainly if you don't have a plan, I can imagine that, you're feeling the heat, so to
Yeah.
speak. If you don't have a plan for your money, if you don't know where you're going to get your income from, if you don't know how much risk you should be taking or when you should file for Social Security, maybe you don't have a plan for long-term care, or you have parents that are going to be dealing with long-term care, it can get overwhelming.
Is that one of the most overlooked aspects that you deal with? I heard that taxes and long-term care.
I think it is overlooked, but I don't think it's overlooked because people don't know about it. I think it's one of those topics that people just don't want to go. They don't want to go there because it's not pleasant. It's not fun. They know it's going to be expensive, and it just feels like one of those situations where you're like, maybe if I just don't think about it, it's like avoiding the doctor. Maybe if I just don't go to the doctor, I won't get bad news. Long-term care kind of feels like that, where nobody really wants to talk about it. We have people coming to the office and they're like, I got a plan for long-term care. Martha's going to take me out back and put a bullet in me. And it's like, okay, that's great, but I doubt it.
Co-sign on that.
No.
This is one of my favorite topics when people
Long-term
come to the
care?
office. Well, just this whole idea of the unknown and what's it going to cost and what does it mean? Because I think it's one where we can offer or help our clients achieve the biggest peace of mind. It's like that sigh of relief happens a lot around this conversation. I think it's because, to your point, Matt, everyone's aware of it. The rising cost of healthcare, long-term care, aging parents.
Inflation.
Meanwhile, the cost of living is increasing, and all of that. And so it feels like a big, giant, nebulous problem, but it's not as popular in mainstream media or in news. You open up your phone, you're going to hear a lot more or read a lot more about current markets, or you're going to hear maybe some more about taxes. That's just more kind of mainstream. You don't hear a lot about how to care for your aging parents while you're still paying for college. I've never seen that article before.
You don't hear a lot about planning.
Right.
You hear a lot about fear, what you should be worried about, what you should be scared of.
That doesn't get the clicks.
Right.
That's right.
Nobody wants to click on have a great plan. They're like, I don't know.
And
That seems like a lot.
When we say planning, and the reason why I say I like this topic when it comes up in our meetings is because what we really mean is we can model out those scenarios for you. We can actually use the tools that we use in our process to show you, okay, let's actually model. Matt, you mentioned some numbers, $8,000 or $10,000 a month. We recently had somebody in our office who it wasn't their parents, it was their sister. They're caring for their elderly sister. And it was $10,000 a month for the care that she was needing for memory care.
Crazy.
It's wild. And so, meanwhile, they've got kids in college. Or I should say, I think their grandkids are in college. The point is, they don't know how to solve this problem. And so we can actually model out, okay, $10,000 is going to be earmarked for this, and let's go ahead and assume inflation is this much, and the cost of healthcare increases per year by this much, and let's also factor in the cost of college, and oh, by the way, your own monthly budget in retirement. We can actually model those things and kind of turn the heat up, as it were, on what if inflation goes up by this much?
Yeah.
What if, during this season, there's also a recession? Or whatever in your mind is concerning you, whatever what if you want to see what it would look like. We can kind of build that out as a scenario in our software and show you what it looks like and show you if or when those things happen. Here are the 2 or 3 things we're going to advise you to do to make sure you can still afford it.
And here's what it's going to mean for you. If those couple things happen, if inflation is more than expected, if you have a long-term care event, here's how you are actually affected. Here's how it changes how much you can spend, how much you leave behind.
Yeah.
Here's the actual real numbers of what your situation looks like if something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is more, we talked about rich versus wealthy. Yeah. We're getting back to it again. That is being wealthy. You can see the impact of things not going according to plan, and you know what your moves are going to be, right? You've planned out your moves ahead of time, and you know what it's going to mean for you. Rich might just be, well, I hope I can afford it. I hope that my cash flow is high enough to be able to afford that thing that may happen in the future. And it's like, ooh, that's tough.
And you make us be the bad guy.
That.
Yeah,
we'll be the bad guy. So you can bring your 27-year-old, young Johnny who's a perpetual grad student. Time to get a job, buddy. That's the first step in your financial plan is get your adult kids paying for their own lives.
Mom and dad taking care of you long enough. Time for you to start thinking about taking care of them. I can tell you from firsthand experience, my father-in-law was put into memory care, and he had dementia, Alzheimer's. It was a bad situation, but because of what you are just saying right there, My mother-in-law, she had a plan. They had this all put together as soon as he started getting sick. They had everything taken care of. So, on it, not to be like all sad or anything, but on his final days where the whole family is grieving and sad, that is one less thing to worry about because everything was spelled out to a T. From the first day he got sick all the way down to his funeral. Everything was taken care of because they had that plan in place. Let me give out that number real quick, 770-741-0120, the importance of having a plan. Matt, you mentioned there kind of jokingly about the couple that comes in and says, well, my plan is I'm going to take him out behind the shed and put a bullet in him. But how do you respond to someone like that? You say, okay, that's not going to work. Let's do this.
First, you have to make sure they're actually joking.
Right. Yeah. First, make sure it's actually a joke. That's tough. I mean, you can't force someone into building a great plan for themselves.
Yeah.
Right. You kind of have to want that. And some people do, and some people don't. And it is interesting to kind of figure out why that may be. But if I'm taking, myself out of it, and if I'm hearing that, I got to believe that the reason people feel that way is because no one wants to think about themselves, going through something like that that's so difficult. Like you mentioned your father-in-law, that's a tough thing. Like nobody wants to think about getting dementia and Alzheimer's and all the kind of emotional pain and trauma that goes with that. And so I totally understand. Like that's not an easy conversation. And if you don't want to have that conversation, if you're not ready to have that conversation, then you're not going to have it.
Right.
But I would just encourage you that it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can actually be a good thing, and it can be a life-giving thing. And maybe the answers aren't as bad or as you might be thinking. It's going back to like going and seeing the doctor for the checkup. It may not be that you're going to just get manufactured bad news.
I think a lot of people say those things, those jokes, take me out back. And they say it because everyone also says this, I don't want to be a burden on my family. That's
right.
If I say to someone sitting across the table from me, I say, hey, what's one of your biggest goals for the next 20 years? Well, high on that list is I just want to be a burden to my family. I want to make sure that they're taken care of. And that's a pretty common thing.
Especially from people who have gone through it with like their own
with
parents.
Their parents or their friends. They've seen it with their friends. So that's high on the list. So I think they say those things, take me out back and put me out of my misery. Joking, but there's a little hint of truth in it. And what they're saying sometimes is like, I have no idea what to do. I don't know what my options are. So the only thing I can think of is just make it quick and painless.
I just know that being a burden to my family is like the worst thing I can imagine.
That's worse than getting a bullet in the head.
But if you think about it, if you have no plan in place and you do get
that
sick,
is being
then you
the burden.
become a burden to your
exactly.
family.
That's exactly where I was going with this. The biggest burden, the automatic burden that you will place on your family is if you don't plan for those things. You are, by definition, being a burden if you don't address it. That's just the point. And so what's also really, really fun about this is that there are a lot more options than I think most people realize. There are some pretty simple things as well. They're not talked about as much, as I mentioned earlier, in mainstream kind of news and articles that you read because they're not as exciting. But there are a lot of products, investment products. There are a lot of insurance products that actually are pretty favorable. And a lot of folks like, I had no idea this existed. I've heard about long-term care insurance and how you have to pay all these premiums. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And that sounds like a terrible idea, which we would agree with. Yeah. But there are other products that are available that most people say, I had no idea this was an option. So how many, this is a hypothetical question, anybody listening, how many options are there out there that you don't know about? You don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for.
And if you're avoiding that conversation because you don't want to create a situation where you're some kind of a burden or you're just not sure you want to go there because it's tough to go there. I would just encourage you that it's always better to plan and prepare. And the news is probably not going to be as bad as you might think it's going to be. The conversation's not going to be as hard as you might think it's going to be. And actually, it can give a lot of life, and it can alleviate a lot of stress that you may not even know that you have. It might alleviate a lot of anxiety that's kind of keeping you captive and keeping you from making good decisions. Because I tell you what, it's difficult to make a plan around retirement if you are holding on to tons of anxiety and you can't quite put your finger on what it is or where it's coming from. That's just going to keep you paralyzed.
I would say the earlier you start, the better the news is. I don't mean earlier like, doing long-term care planning when you're 40. probably doesn't going to make much sense because you need to have the bulk of your savings done. I don't mean that you're already retired or ready to retire tomorrow, but you need to have the bulk of your savings done, because then you kind of know within a certain realm of kind of a range of what your retirement nest egg is going to be.
And you should probably have some of your income planned out.
Yes. And once you're at that point, late 50s, early 60s, I'm just ballparking here, the earlier you start, if you can start having this conversation then, the better the news will be, to your point, Matt.
What point of working with the team at the Vincent Financial Group, 770-741-0120. Again, 770-741-0120 to reach out to the team and have this conversation. At what point do you start getting into the next chapter? Because I know the first initial consultations about, hey, let's take a look at your portfolio. What's your income strategy in retirement? What are you going to be paying in taxes? How far down the line do we start getting serious about the next chapter?
Well, pretty quick. I mean, we want to know what your goals are for retirement, what kind of lifestyle you want, what's important to you, what would make you feel content, what's going to make you feel wealthy, versus rich.
Yeah.
And so that's day one. That's like the first step of our process. We've got to know that first, because even the portfolio design and the investment management and what insurance products might make sense for you, all of that is a means to an end. That's just really simply trying to organize what you've worked so hard to build in a way that kind of allows you to construct the life that you want. And so we need to understand that pretty early on.
Yeah. I would also say, obviously, everybody's different. And so people come in with all kinds of different concerns. Some people come in with an income concern. Maybe it's a long-term care concern. Have I saved enough? I'm worried about risk or recession or tariffs or taxes. There's all kinds of things. What we've learned over doing this for the last 10 years and helping, I think we've probably done over 5,000 reviews of some form or fashion, whether it's a full-blown retirement plan review or like an insurance review, or we've done over 5,000 reviews over the last 10 years. And so we've pretty much seen everything that there is to see. And what is interesting is we've learned that you can't just give everybody everything all at once, because there's all kinds of decisions you're going to have to make around retirement. What order are you going to take your money out of your accounts? When are you going to turn on Social Security? Are you going to be in an IRMA bracket? Are you going to do any Roth conversions? Are you going to add insurance? Are you going to add guarantees? There's tons of decisions. And they might be big, they might be little. But the more decisions you add around retirement, the more stress and anxiety it can create. And so we've learned that a lot of this we absolutely have to tackle, but we don't necessarily have to do it all up front.
Yeah.
And if we do, it's like eating an elephant. And it doesn't work well for anybody. You don't actually eat the full meal. You can't digest all of it. And so we've learned that we kind of have to, scratch where you're itching. So if you come in and you're worried about taxes, we'll talk about taxes. But we know behind the scenes, there's probably, 10 other conversations we need to have at some point, and planning that out in what order, that is the name of the game. And if you want to start kind of planning it out, having those conversations in a thoughtful, methodical way, in a safe place, a safe environment, I think we're a safe environment for that. I'd invite you to call us 770-741-0120 or check us out at retireatlradio.com.
Again, that number 770-741-0120. Having a great conversation about income and retirement, your tax strategy, Social Security, long-term care, but most importantly, Aaron Vincent, Matthew Decker, they want to know, what is your definition of wealthy and how can they help get you there? 770-741-0120. You can call right now. We have a representative standing by to schedule that initial no-cost, no-obligation consultation, or you can get more at retireatlradio.com. Quick break and we're back with more. This is Retire ATL. It's all powered by the Vincent Financial Group.